Hey YouTube, this is James of Let's Start Games. Today we're actually going to be working on the final piece from our NES eBay lot. We're going to take a look at the two zappers that came with the lot. We're going to start with the orange zapper. It actually works fine, but I'm going to go ahead and take it apart just to show you guys what's on the inside and to give it a good clean. We're actually going to start with taking these 3 screws out of the gray piece. These light gray pieces come off first, and there's actually a hidden screw underneath. With those pieces removed, we'll go ahead and take out the rest of the screws. There's actually 2 weights in an NES Zapper to give it its heft. This first one here is in the front, and it's actually 2 curved weights taped together so that the light has a little hole to go through. The second weight is in the grip. We'll go ahead and undo the wire from the strain relief. Then there are 3 screws holding in the trigger mechanism. There's actually a plastic lens at the front to help focus the light into the sensor. Because the plastic parts have these little foam protectors on the inside, rather than giving it a full soak and scrub like I normally do in hot soapy water, I'm just going to scrub the whole thing down with a toothbrush and isopropyl alcohol. Normally, I wouldn't take this trigger mechanism apart at all, but I want to show y'all what's on the inside. And here you can actually see the trigger mechanism in action. We'll go ahead and put this thing back together before it decides to fly apart with all the springs. With everything clean, we'll go ahead and put it back together. We'll put the whole inner mechanism back into place, make sure the wires go where they need to go. Let's put the lens back in its little groove in the front, and then we'll put the weights back. Let's go ahead and screw down the trigger mechanism with its 3 screws. And then we can put the top part of the shell back on. With that back into place, we'll go ahead and put our screws back in. And finally, we'll put their gray pieces back on. And now we have a fully cleaned NES Zapper. So the gray Zapper that came with the lot actually didn't work at all. I have an idea of what's wrong with it, but our first problem is actually going to be removing this screw. You can see based on this Q-tip that it's actually incredibly rusted inside. So I'm going to go through a few different things here between Q-tips, alcohol, picking it out with a spudger, picking it out with my screwdriver, everything else to try to clean the screw out to see if I can get a good hold to unscrew it. But unfortunately, it's just not going to work. So like I did with an NES controller in a previous video, I'm going to have to drill this one out. Again, I prefer doing this by hand than using an actual mechanical tool like a Dremel, because I feel like I have more control over it. Once I have the gray pieces off, I'm going to take my pair of pliers and actually try to remove this screw. After a lot of work, it finally came out. And with that finally removed, I'm going to go through the same steps of disassembling here to just take the Zapper apart and give it a good clean. Finally, I'm going to take a look at what I think is the problem here. This cable has some electrical tape on it, and like we saw with the NES controllers, my guess is that there's probably damage to the cabling itself, preventing this Zapper from working. Once we have the cable removed, we can actually take a look to see what's under the tape. And like we saw with the NES controller, it looks like mice damage. We'll go ahead and test the continuity on all of our wires to see which one might be the faulty one. The brown wire works. The white wire is the one that's unfortunately dead. And our blue and purple wires work just fine. So now that we've identified which wire is the problem, let's go ahead and try to splice in a new bit of wire to fix this. And with the white wire patched, let's go ahead and test continuity again. And with that, the break in the wire is gone. Now, when I worked on the NES controllers, I actually used 2:1 heat shrink. With the connector and the strain relief on this cable, I decided to try my hand at some 3:1 heat shrink. I've never used this stuff before, but I figured it'd be worth a try. Once we put it into place, we'll go ahead and heat it up, and it actually shrinks to 1/3 of its size rather than half of its size, like our typical heat shrink. It covers up the patch job really well, but it is thick. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up using this again in another repair. And then we'll reassemble our great controller. And with that, we have 2 clean and working zappers. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing for more content.